Hello and welcome to the Knowing Self, Knowing Others podcast, the fortnightly podcast that explores self-awareness, leader effectiveness and leadership at all levels. Join me, your host, Nia Thomas, as we talk to today's Knowing Self, Knowing Others guest. I'm joined today by Robertson Hunter Stewart, and I'm absolutely delighted that Rob has been able to join me today. I've been so looking forward to this conversation. Rob is an author, management coach, and has a background in the hotel industry. So really has come up through the ranks, seeing what it looks like, sounds like, feels like, and really understands what management and leadership is all about. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rob to introduce himself.
Well, first of all, Nia, thank you for having me today. It's great to be on the show with you. As you've just said, my name's Robertson Hunter Stewart, so a real mouthful. And the thing about that is it's really great for when you Google me, I'm the only person that exists under that name. So it's very good for my referencing on Google. But most people call me Rob. To introduce myself, well, I've been in the hotel industry most of my life. And I started out actually after a career in finance and other things in Scotland. Came to France. And fell in love basically with the hotel industry because I started working at Disneyland Paris when it opened in 1992. And there, because I couldn't speak French at that time, I had to learn to speak French, of course, so I could speak to my colleagues. And at the same time, I was what would they call a cast member A. So I was basically sweeping up the cigarette butts. That was, And when I left in 98, I was then director of the whole of Disney Village and the whole shebang, basically. And I left to go to the traditional hotel industry, which was then the Meridian Étoile, which is a 1,025 bedroom hotel in the middle of Paris. And I took over the housekeeping of that hotel. Got a team of about 160 housemates. So I did that. And then I was made rooms division manager. So then I had 240 people working with me. And then after that, I went to Poland, became the director of the most famous hotel in Poland, which is the Royal Meridian Bristol in Poland. I was director there for 4 years. Then I went to Budapest for 1.5 years, was director of the Royal Corinthia Grand Hotel there, which is like the Four Seasons, really high standard of hotel. Came back to Paris because I was asked to run as a general manager of the Concorde Lafayette, which is a 1,000-room hotel. It's the third highest building in Paris, in fact, as well. Same time. Then was CEO of Chief Operating Officer for Warwick Hotels Europe. I did that for a year. Then Disney called me back and wanted me to come back as their director general for their biggest volume hotel, which is 1 million room nights, 1 million people per year. So I did that for 2 years. And then I went back to the Meridian Étoile again for the last bit. And I was then the general manager of that hotel where I started as housekeeper a few years before. And basically at that stage, I then decided to do my own thing. So I quit all that and decided that I wanted to be my own man and write books. Because I always dreamed about writing books. So to write books about management with my experience, because I have really in total 40 years experience of management, really. So I decided I wanted to write, I wanted to teach, and I wanted to coach other people and pass on, basically a passion for passing on knowledge. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm a consultant, a professor at several schools in Paris of management and leadership. And I'm also, I've written 3 books on management. So the second one, which is very successful in the United States, and the third one, which has just been released.
Having really experienced management and significant roles in management and senior leadership across a number of organizations. So really does put you in a position where when you are writing your books and you are coaching, you really know what you're talking about. What's really interesting about our discussion is that listeners will have heard me say this before. My background is in the public sector, whereas your sector is very, very different. So it's going to be really interesting to hear your responses to these questions coming at it from that perspective. How do you define self-awareness?
Well, for me, self-awareness is all to do with, from the perspective of a manager or leader, and my own perspective also. It's all about being able to look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and know what you did a good job. And not only you did a good job, but you did it the right way, and you didn't harm anyone in the way that you approached your work. It doesn't mean you never do anything wrong, It's just having to be aware and be in touch, basically, the honest part of yourself, I would say, which tells you, yeah, that wasn't so great. I can improve there. And this has happened my whole life, obviously. I mean, like most people, I think, where in order to be in touch with yourself, you have to be honest with yourself first and foremost, I think, and be able to say to yourself, okay, it's basically a conversation with yourself, which is constant, which is basically, if you want to improve, you always have to be asking yourself the same questions. Was that good, the way I spoke to that person? Was that a good way to do that interview? Did I interrupt that person before they were finished? I mean, always constantly asking myself these questions, because, and I'll tell you why it's like that. It's because I once asked a senior colleague at work when I was a young manager, and I was very, very full of beans and energy, but not much experience. And so I asked him, I said, "Could you tell me what I should improve on?" And he said to me, "Okay, well, shall we have a meeting?" Yeah, I said, yeah, please come to my office and we'll have coffee and tell me where I should improve and so forth. And he said, well, and he came into this meeting and he said, "So I've only got one thing to say to you, Rob." I said, "Really?" I said, "I thought we were going to have a meeting." He said, "No, there's only one thing I've got to say to you. You've asked me the question, which was, what should I improve?" He said to me, "We're all masters of our own silence and prisoners of what we say."
Oh, very profound.
I thought. So that finished the conversation very fast. And basically I understood I talked too much and I wasn't listening enough. So it was a very interesting way to tell me that. And it was someone I respected a lot. And that was one of the things that led me to be more inward looking and try and measure my own behavior and to answer your question. And that's why, for me, it's a question of being in a mirror, constant in a mirror, and seeing, if I acted like that and I was the person that was on the other side of that conversation, would I be happy with what I just said, or would I not be happy? And I think that's very important in terms of self-awareness. And I think the other thing is to know about self-awareness is to know where your limits are. And I often talk to my students about this and tell them, it doesn't matter. If you want to be a great leader or a great manager, it's fine. It's great. It's a huge ambition. I said, it takes a lot of work. So there's one thing you have to understand. You don't know everything. And you'll never know everything. So be self-aware of that. And I'm very aware of that because, for example, I'm always telling my students, someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer, just say, "I don't know." Don't say, "Well, it's a little bit like this," or "It's a little bit like." If you don't know, you just don't know. And there's no harm in that. It's actually much better to do that. And so this awareness comes also to a question, I think, at that time, of confidence, to be able to put yourself out there and admit, "Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know." And to be confident enough to say that, and to be aware that if you do tell a little porcupine, a little white lie to someone, and say, "Well, actually, it's more like this," and you don't really know, that can be very harmful. So I think self-awareness has a lot to do with that. Really, really, just with self-knowledge as well, knowing how trying. I mean, not always succeeding, but trying to understand how you're acting, and if it's in accordance with your own values, what you really believe. And I think sometimes you get it wrong. Of course, as like everyone else, I've lost my cool before and said things I shouldn't have said, and then had to regret it and think, "Well, I better do better next time."
Do you think there's a relationship between self-awareness and leader effectiveness?
Very, very definitely. And it really goes back to, this goes back to the ancient history of Peter Drucker, who basically invented management by objectives. If you're not self-aware, when you're trying to take a step back, people talk a lot about taking some distance with what they're doing, or French to say, prendre de hauteur, so go higher up or go further away from what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And try and have a look at the big picture, and not just, as we always say, if you're looking at one tree, you're only going to see the tree, you're never going to see the forest. I think that's very important. And if you are aware of yourself, it's very important for being effective, because it's another thing, a quote from Peter Drucker. It's a very interesting question, actually, because Peter Drucker himself made a quote regarding this question, which was, "Management is about doing things right. Leadership is about doing the right things."
Yeah.
So there we have totally, if you are self-aware, you're going to be more interested in doing the right things and just not doing things well. You take time, you step back, you think, and you're effective because of that. Because if people are caught up in the action, yeah, and you're just reacting all the time, you're not thinking about things, you're not taking time to think, I think you get yourself in a lot of trouble very fast. A
Yes,
lot of bottled water.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, that time from, I think the phrase is giving yourself time to respond instead of react.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, you're totally right. That's totally it. Because you often, of course, often you can be caught off guard, of course, and react to something. But it's always better, and it's what I tell people when they're in one-to-one situations. For example, is don't answer people's questions for them. For example, just when you ask someone a question, use the silence. Give them time to actually think of what you've asked. Because not everyone's going to answer like that. Some people are going to take a bit of time.
Yeah.
And it's not because they don't want to answer, probably because they're actually thinking about what they're going to answer,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think definitely there's definitely something very, very important between self-awareness and being effective, because it's also to do with in terms of leadership, as your question was phrased. It's also to do with giving the example and leading by example, because there's nothing better than that. I mean, if I remember a story I was telling to my students one day, and it was about someone that was shouting at their staff, and I was there. They didn't see me. I was their direct boss, and I saw this incident. And I said to them, "Did you realise?" I said, "You were shouting at them. And why were you shouting at them again? Can you just tell me clearly?" "Yeah, because they're not nice enough to the customers, and they're not smiling with the customers." And I said, "So do you think they're smiling now when they're going up there upstairs now?" Maybe not. So I think
Absolutely.
your example was exactly the contrary of what you were just trying to tell them. So I said, so maybe next time, try and be happy when you're telling them something like that. It might be more effective. Yeah. So actually behave as you want the others to behave. It might be actually quite a good idea.
Do you think effective leaders can be found at all levels of organizations?
Yes, I do. And I think it's not a question of level. But I don't think leaders are born, you see. I think they're made. And I'll start by that. And what I mean by that is that anyone can be a leader if they really want to be, and on the condition that they really do like people. Okay. Because if they don't, they're in the wrong place and doing the wrong job. I think at all levels, because it's a matter of there's a lot of technique in management and leadership, things that can be learned, and also things that can be unlearned. So unlearned, for example, like I said earlier, like not listening. I had to unlearn not listening. Yeah, so it was one of my terrible faults when I was younger. You've got to unlearn some behaviors and learn other behaviors, which basically mold you into a leader. And sometimes, in fact, you don't even need the title. It's not the title that makes a leader. It's basic if people are going to follow that person. So, Simon Sinek, you know who Simon Sinek is, of course, yeah. A boss has the title, a leader has the people. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
and I really believe that, because a boss, yeah, okay, you've got a title, doesn't mean you're a leader. Leaders are people who can convince, can really and allow, and are happy, are confident within themselves. It goes back to the first couple of questions too, and are able to project confidence and self-confidence and make other people confident in their own ability. And the people will naturally follow a leader. You don't have to have a title or anything. You can just be a leader, and it's just obvious who the leader is. I mean, we see this quite often when I remember a funny incident happened to me on holiday once. We were in some foreign country, far, far away, and two people want to be the boss. So they started talking. Yes, just can everyone listen up? I was trying to help them at one point. I said, "Oh, guys, next time, maybe you should ask people, do you want to talk, or maybe." And I ended up getting this leadership role, but I didn't want it. I was on holiday just because of the way I was acting. But they were acting in a rather, I would think, what would you call it, obstreperous manner. And it didn't help, and people just didn't want to follow them at all. So basically what happened, everyone started arguing with them.
I was interested you said that leaders can be made rather than born. Within my research, the findings were the opposite. However, I actually think we agree, because what you said, that people have to want it or have to have the ability that then allows them to move forward. And
Yeah.
and I wonder if part of if I'd have gone back to the people that I spoke to in my research, they would have said that's exactly what we mean. We have to have
Hmm.
people that are interested, able, and then you
Hmm.
put that together and allow it
Yeah.
to develop, flourish, you nurture it, etc., training
Yeah.
and all the other things that go with it. So I wonder
Totally.
if actually we sounded like we're disagreeing, but actually we're saying the same thing.
I think it's a disagreement where we're agreeing basically. I think yeah, I think you're right. It's I've got one way to explain it, which comes from a quote by Zig Ziglar. He's no longer with us, but he was a great man, and he basically said, it's not your aptitude which determines your altitude; it's your attitude. I think there is aptitude, of course. There is some natural aptitude because, of course, if you just don't have that knack or you don't have that little bit of drive within you, I mean, you're just not going to do it. It's as simple as that. But then what's even more important than having confidence and having skills and being able to learn these skills, it's also your attitude, I think. I think your attitude's what we goes back to what we said before is what you show to others. Yeah. And I always like to tell people, because people say, well, yeah, there's all this thing about in modern management today about authenticity, how important. Yeah, of course it's important. Yeah, be yourself. This comes back to your first question. Yeah, you have to be authentic, of course. Yeah, but never forget you're playing a role as a
Yeah.
manager.
Yeah, it's true.
And how I explain that to my students is very simple. I always tell them, I say, okay, you've been out to the pub the night before. Okay, you've been up there until 4 o'clock in the morning. You feel miserable. You've got a head that's killing you, and the next morning you get a massive migraine. You have no right at all to act differently than you normally do. And if you don't feel that you can, don't go to work. So you're meant to be a leader. So you have to still give the example. And your attitude is going to be copied. I mean, it's mimicking. People mimic your behavior.
They
So if
do.
you start to behave badly, they are going to do the same. Yeah. So,
Yeah, most definitely. Do you think leaders at the most strategic level of organizations have greater self-awareness than leaders at other levels of organizations?
not necessarily. Sometimes they do if they're great leaders. If you're a Richard Branson or you're I don't know, one of these guys, yeah, of course you do. But these guys are massively successful, so of course they do, I think. But not necessarily. I mean, it's not to do for me. It's not to do with level. Not what you do. It's who you are, isn't it? You can have a really really bad guy at the top and still have an organization that works because the people at other levels are making up for that, yeah, because they're actually doing the work he should be doing, or he or she, yeah, should be doing, but they're doing it well. And so the people that work with them don't realize how bad it is up there. So that I've seen that happen, and then the contrary, of course, if it is bad at the top, eventually it becomes worse as you go down because it just all falls down, doesn't it? I think it's nothing to do with the level. I think it's to do more with the person and how the person sees the world or the worldview of each. I had a discussion regarding it's actually related to this, a discussion regarding what's more important, is it the employee or is it the customer? So I totally believe it's the employee. We argued about this for about, I don't know, 2 hours. And it led to me writing my first book. So it actually ended up very well because in fact it incited me to do something about it because I couldn't win this argument. We were at a quid pro quo, so no one would step back from their position, and I thought, right, I'm gonna write this and prove it I'm right. So I did. I don't know whether it proved or not, by the way, but it's one of these situations where you think, okay, so now I'll take a step back from all, so I'll try and really put my point of view forward. And I think anyone at any level is capable of doing that. It's just a question of habits that people learn, good habits or bad habits. If someone's capable of being a leader, at any level. Self-awareness is really to do with habits. Are people being introspective or not? It's nothing to do with what level we are. I don't think. I've seen some bosses who just don't think at all. They just give orders. They don't know how to delegate. They've never heard of situational management. Who's Kenneth Blanchard? We don't know. So but they don't know what they're doing basically. So a lot of the time that happens because experts get promoted to managers without any coaching or any no one accompanies them in this. So that's quite a serious problem sometimes, right?
In your experience in coaching and managing,
Mm-hmm.
do you find that there are And it's something that I've spoken to somebody else about, and they've also mentioned the tier below that strategic tier, who actually are taking the weight of the organisation, because actually there is a lack of self-awareness at that strategic level. Do you have experience of that team below that strategic level having to take that weight? Is it common? Is it uncommon? When it does happen, is it detrimental to an organization? Do you find that people are quiet quitting and very loudly quitting as part of that? How does that look in your experience?
Well, in my experience, it depends on the level of things. I mean, how bad things really are. Because if things are, and I've had experience of both, where I've had someone, because I've been at the senior level, but had someone very senior above me. And then twice or three times in my life, it's been a fantastic experience because I've had great mentors and great coaches and so forth. And then once or twice, it's not been so good. People know what the heck they're doing at all. And then it's almost impossible to take the brunt. Part of your role, I think, as a manager or as a leader, is basically even if this is happening, something negative is happening with you or to you, you should be able to translate things so that the level just below you doesn't see that. Yeah? But then it gets to a stage where everyone sees it, because the boss will do something stupid like talk to you badly in front of the people that are meant to be working for you or something. If that happens, it's finished. You have no longer any grip on the situation at all. And I've seen that happen. Personally, I've seen it happen to me. The owner telling me something a bit silly in front of his own kids, who are also part of the business. Bit of a mixed affair. But at the end of the day, if it's really, the other level can manage things, as long as the person above isn't being harmful, directly harmful. That's what I'm trying to say. If someone's just incompetent, doesn't matter, because the people that are there, the COMEX or the executive committee, if they're competent, it doesn't matter if the president's a complete idiot. The COMEX are going to save it anyway.
Do you think effective leaders have more self-awareness than ineffective leaders?
Yeah, I think they do. I think it's definitely a big yes, because if ineffective leaders, in fact, I think if you're going to lead people, you really need to know how it feels. There's this thing about followership today that we hear about a lot about, and if you've been a follower at one time, you know what a great leader should be doing. So being highly aware of that makes it nearly impossible for someone that's not self-aware to lead, because the others catch on very quickly to that and say, well, this guy really he's not in touch with himself at all, or herself at all. And not only are they not in touch with themselves, but they're not in touch with the reality of, and they'll ask people to do things which are nigh impossible. And they get answers like that, of course, because people at one point just say, well, sorry, I'd love to do that, but it's just not possible what you're asking me to do. So I think, if people are self-aware, they're much more effective as leaders.
I want to talk to you a little bit about my two newest books. So my precedent book was called One-to-One, Managing Quality Time with Individuals for Engagement and Success. That book was published 1.5 years ago and is a really great success, to be honest, especially in the United States and in Great Britain. It talks about how to really build relationships with people based on confidence and trust. It's written 5WH on the cover. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's the first book in the series of 5WH, and these are the pertinent questions. What? Why, when, where, who, and how. And I address each of those questions in all the books in the series. Here the subject is one-to-one formal meetings with your employees. So I tell you what it's about, what this type of meeting actually looks like, where you should have these meetings, when you should have these meetings, why is very important, why you should have these meetings. And then I tell you exactly how to go about having these meetings and the techniques that you can use to make them successful. My newest book is Time to Manage, an Agenda for Effective Leadership. 5WH, you'll notice once again. Now, this book really is about how to manage one's time, but it's a very particular time management book. This is a book that shows you how to, first of all, be efficient and teaches you about time management techniques, but it then goes on to discuss that being efficient with your time and the time of others, it's really not enough. You need to become effective as a manager and lead and manage in the right way so as to ensure that you're effective in using your time and the time of others around you, I can't tell you there's some great surprises inside the book waiting for you.
Robertson Hunter Stewart, it's been absolutely brilliant to have you here. Thank you so much for finding time to have our conversation. It's been really, really interesting. Thank you once again.
Well, thank you very much for your invitation. It was great talking to you today, Neil.
Thank you for joining me, your host, Nia Thomas, at the Knowing Self, Knowing Others podcast. If you'd like to know more about self-awareness, leader effectiveness, and leadership at all levels, please take a look at my website, knowingselfknowingothers.co.uk. You can also join me on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Make sure you bookmark the Knowing Self, Knowing Others podcast and tune into the next episode in 2 weeks' time. I look forward to having you on my learning journey. If you'd like to join me as a guest on the Knowing Self, Knowing Others podcast, please drop me a line at info@knowingselfknowingothers.co.uk. If you'd like to advertise your podcast, book, or company connected to self-awareness, leader effectiveness, or leadership at all levels, please drop me a line at the same email. Please remember to bookmark the Knowing Self, Knowing Others podcast so that you can keep up to date with all new episodes. Remember to rate this podcast on whichever directory you listen. Knowing Self, Knowing Others is available to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podcast Index, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Pocket Casts, Deezer,